Thank you, Lisa. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Elizabeth Perry. Elizabeth is the President and Chairman of the RAA of South Australia, as well as RAA Insurance. She is Deputy Chancellor of Flinders University and Fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. Ms Perry is a law graduate from the University of Adelaide, partner at EMA Legal, and has more than 30 years' experience in providing strategic and legal advice in the area of employment law. Now, Adelaide is a relationship town. The reason Elizabeth is here today is that I met one of the junior partners at her firm 22 years ago when I was at university. That was pretty scary. I used to think of myself as young until this morning when I realised I started uni 22 years ago. So I'm getting old, getting grey. So look, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm really looking forward to this. Can we all give her a warm welcome?
Thanks, Simon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to first acknowledge the land we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with the country, and acknowledge the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Today, after giving you a bit of a brief overview of my career, I want to move on to the title of this session, which is, of course, the lessons that I have learned over 15 years of board work and over 30 years in the law. As you've heard, I currently have the privilege of serving as President and Chairman of RAA, and I've held that role now for about 18 months, as well as Deputy Chancellor at Flinders University. I've also held board roles in the past at the South Australian Museum and a little-known association in South Australia, the South Australian Water Polo Association. I expect and hope that many of you here are members of the RAA, as we do currently have 720,000 members across South Australia and Broken Hill. And when you think of the population of South Australia being about 1.7 million, that's a large proportion of our state. We're also part of the RAA, which is the conglomeration of all of our sister clubs around Australia, which is a population of 8 million people. So we're quite a powerful voice when it comes to Canberra listening to us. The RAA board is not dissimilar, I was just talking to your president just now, to your board in that we have 13 members of our board, although we've passed a resolution, our members passed a resolution in November at our AGM to reduce that back to 9. We have people serving on our board who are from different areas of the community, different areas of expertise and across South Australia. And of course, I actually see the father of one of our board members here today. I currently, I worked as a lawyer since admission in 1982, and I've worked in large corporate firms. I worked in a firm which was called Alderman Lee & Wilson, and that's what it was called at that time, and also Finlayson's. At the time, Finlayson's, when I worked there in the late 80s, had over 300 people and national affiliations, a large administrative arm, and I'm now working in a firm of 13 people. So in my current firm, instead of having people, or the tea lady that comes around to give you a cup of tea, we all make our own cups of tea, we all make up our own phone calls, do our own typing, and as partners, we're responsible at EMA Legal for meeting our budgets, ensuring staff welfare and authorising all our payments. So I was drawn to a career in law because I found an area I think that interested me, which is employment law. And employment law is endlessly fascinating. Every day you come to work and it's a different story. And often it's, I just can't believe I heard that, even after all these years. And some of the strange stories I've heard, some I can't repeat because they're so awful, and of course I would never breach client confidentiality. One client once told me I could write a book about the nasty sex stories that have happened at work. would you believe? So there's all sorts of different things that happen. One more amusing one, I suppose, was in an old folks' home where one of the staff brought a snake into work in a bag because they wanted to have it measured at the end of the day and didn't want to leave it in the car. Not good if it got away. So how do you deal with an employee like that? Another quite fascinating story was when the PA to one of the people I was working for was found to be living a double life and was using her work computer for her escort agency. So every day there is an interesting story. And I think it's that background in the law, in employment law, industrial law, dealing with unions, being incredibly patient and trying to teach my clients to be patient, that led to me wanting to be involved in board work. The issues that I have dealt with all my professional career have been to do with people and culture. And it's that people and culture, I think we're seeing now with the Royal Commission and with the CBA scandals and all the things that you read in the Fin of late, it's getting people right. It's understanding all the layers of your organisation as a board that are the critical issues these days. So it was that involvement in employment law and people and culture particularly that led me to want to take on board work. Over the years, I've of course seen many changes, both in my professional non-executive career and executive career. When I started as a lawyer, the reception had a switchboard with lines and you plugged them in and out. Probably some of you remember that. Typewriters, and the only way of communicating was the telex machine. So, and in those days I drove a Morris Minor 1000, which had a hole in the floor, so water came up and sprayed all over my legs as I was driving. In the end I had a plate welded on to stop the water coming up, but I can tell you I was a member of the RAA at that time. I feel that we were given responsibility early in those days, perhaps sometimes not so wisely, more responsibility than young people are given now. Maybe it's because of the legislative controls that we see in so many different areas of our work. One example of that is I remember as a young article clerk, I was only 21, I was called to go out to Yatala and interview a convicted rapist by myself. And ended up being in the room with this fellow by myself, guards a long distance away. He had tattoos on his hands saying, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of death," up his arms. I think he was on drugs. Wearing a singlet and the shortest shorts. It was really confronting, I can tell you. And I don't think you'd see that happening today. I think legislation is probably good in terms of overcoming some of those sorts of things, but getting that sort of responsibility was also really important. Interestingly, in those days, I also did a lot of motor vehicle accident insurance work, so that was an interesting precursor to where I am now with the RAA. They were slightly different times for women, and I do remember being told by one of the people in one of the firms I worked for that I must not wear trousers. I couldn't believe it, but they said, "Oh no, you'll never get ahead if you wear trousers." They seem like such different times now, don't they? I was also the first partner to work less than full-time, and when I think about it now, in retrospect, and I see how women are able to juggle their careers and being a mother, we've certainly moved on. In those times, nobody was to know that I was working less than full-time, and I was doing a lot of radio interviews, and so to keep the children safe, I would actually strap them into the car, in their car seats. I had two by this time, and I would be in the kitchen and they would be in the carport. I'd be looking into the carport to see them in the car while I did the radio interview. So there was no other way of doing a radio interview that didn't have the sound of children in the background, which of course nowadays people don't mind, but in those days it would have been seen that I wasn't taking my career as seriously as I should have. In the time I've been working on boards, they have so many more technological resources. Thankfully, we don't get the piles of paperwork that we used to get. We now get our papers on apps and tablets. And that's great because it allows you to download your papers, your committee papers, your board papers, and you can carry them around and read them. And it's much easier for me to carry an iPad in my bag than great piles of paper. And if you're overseas or you're working somewhere else, then you can manage that as well. I also think one of the changes in board work over the years is that probably directors do understand the obligations and the needs to keep up with their education and take their role seriously, particularly, of course, given recent events. But I think 15 years ago it was probably seen as a bit more of a job that people could aspire to without needing to really necessarily put the hard yards in. But I think most people are aware these days that it's absolutely critical that you read everything that you are given, that you're across everything that you are given, and that you fulfil the responsibilities that you have as a director. So important to me in the workplace is probably firstly people and culture, not surprisingly. And without good people in a business will struggle. And it actually staggers me that I still see people who run a really hierarchical structure that doesn't allow for people's contribution to come forward. In those sort of environments, it's very easy for bullying and harassment claims to occur, and for people to be not motivated to contribute because they feel that their contribution's not required. Of course, one of the challenges for business is actually dealing with the flexibility needs of millennials and Gen Y. When I first started, of course, as I've just said to you, all the work was done in a way where you were at work and everyone saw you at work, and the longer hours you worked at work, the better performer you were seen to be. And these days, flexibility, I understand, is the second most important thing to millennials, the most important being interesting work. And if you can't offer flexibility and interesting work, they'll move on because there's no loyalty. And it's interesting in a workplace because now we can have 4 generations of workers side by side. And you think of people who were born, for example, in the 70s, they haven't known life without Star Wars. Or Neighbours, or Kylie Minogue, whose birthday it is today. It creates its own problems, and it creates problems that boards need to be aware of in creating respect and good team relationships, particularly when people aren't present at work, if you are accommodating that flexibility, and how to maintain safety in the workplace. There's very interesting cases about people outside of the workplace. One example is a fellow changed some requirements on his computer, and it meant a whole water system went down. He said it was his child who did who changed the keyboard notations, and so it was found when the matter went to the commission. And in fact, he was reinstated. And it was found that whilst he should have been more careful in not having the child be able to access the computer, that if he was allowed to work at home, then these things happen. So you can see the boundaries are shifting, and it's really important as a board member to understand that. At the RAA, one of the ways that I inform myself about the culture of the business is to go out into the operations. So I've been out on patrol a number of times, and I find that quite fascinating, and how the patrol members deal with not knowing what sort of a problem they're going to get other than a sketchy piece of information, and dealing with people, our members, who are often distressed because their car won't work and they want to get somewhere. I've sat in on the phones with people taking the phone calls from our members. I talk to the managers. We do 360 degrees of the managing director. I talk to his managers below. I've been out on school visits to see the work that we do in Street Smart Primary, and I talk to the teachers from RAA who are delivering that program to understand how they're delivering the program and what their concerns are. And so I talk to as many people as possible within the organisation and get out into the organisation as much as possible. I also review cultural surveys that we do on a regular basis, and we also have Net Promoter Score checks. and of course talk to members as much as possible. At RAA, we do an event called Gold 50, where we invite members who've had 50 years of service to come to a morning tea, and I do an address to them, and then we have an educational session about recent road rules and just a quick quiz and a bit of history about the RAA, which was, of course, formed 30th of September 1903, so it's a very old organisation. So those are the ways at RAA that we try and make sure that we're digging into the culture and understanding what's going on. I did read in the paper the other day that Netflix have adopted a system that goes even further than that. They're actually allowing board members to sit in on executive meetings, and they call it seeing Netflix as it operates in the wild. And they consider that gives them confidence in management when they're facing challenges. So there's all different ways that people are dealing with the challenges of understanding the people and culture. One interesting one I noticed the other day from LinkedIn is they actually have a Take Your Parents to Work Day, catering to millennials who actually want their parents to know what they're doing at work. It's the last thing I would have done, but it's apparently very popular. In small business, of course, in our legal partnership, it's much easier. You can walk around, you can talk to people every day, you're aware when people are away, you're aware of turnover, and it's much easier to monitor the culture. So people and culture is really important to me. Working hard is really important to me. It's a bit old-fashioned, I think, but I think when you're at work, you do the work, and that you need to make sure that you are working hard. When it comes to leadership, to me that means talking about what you want to achieve, getting on and doing what you've agreed you'll do, and getting it done in the time frame that's required, and prioritising appropriately. And then stepping back and analysing and measuring and including listening to everyone's views about the success of the measures. Simon, are you going to give me a wind-up when you want, or a 5-minute call? Yep. Okay, great. So lessons I've learnt, some tips and traps. I do have a strong belief that we should use the ability and talents that we have. In my case, because of my bent towards people and culture, I believe that's something I've been able to contribute to boards. And be motivated always by strong personal and ethical values. If you don't believe in something that one of the boards that you're sitting on or happens in the workplace, I really believe you have a requirement to call that out. And what we've seen in the papers about independent reports being prepared and how that occurred, I think really shines the spotlight on people on boards to absolutely ensure that if you're getting an independent report, it really is. Secondly, I think you have to work with good people. And if you can, build really strong and authentic networks and friendships. And really that's one of the purposes, I believe, of Rotary and what you do is that you actually establish really strong and authentic networks which allow people to collaborate and get together. Partnership and collaborations is where we're all going to be going in the future in the new environment. It's so easy to connect and it's easy to get help as long as you're prepared to ask for it. In the RAA, we recognise the strength of working as a team and each person contributing, and one example of that is, again, with our sister clubs, I can always pick up the phone and talk to my counterpart president in Western Australia or Queensland if there's something I want to raise with them and compare or just see how they're doing things. And we also do that on a worldwide basis through the Federation of International Automobile Association, which we're a member of as well. And it's interesting, you find in Spain, in Germany, in Austria, they're doing the same things we are. They're all facing the challenges of automated cars, of electric cars, what will happen to insurance companies if cars aren't required anymore, how do we stay relevant to our members. Thirdly, I think you need to be enthusiastic generally. And particularly about a challenge or a feedback. It's always appreciated by people around you if you're enthusiastic. So I see in my law business, if you give a young person some work and they take it and say, great, I'm really interested in that, it makes everybody feel so much better. Same at RAA or other places. If people are enthusiastic about the work you give them, then you feel confident in giving them the work and in their interest in the matter. Thirdly, I think always ask questions. Never be afraid to ask questions. That's certainly one of the lessons I've learned. Sometimes I know with young board members they feel a concern that that it's a stupid question, and they'll preface their question by, oh, this is probably a dumb question, or this is the new person's question, or whatever. But absolutely, I certainly encourage questions on the RAA board, and I'm a big questioner myself, to understand that you know whether what you're doing is a good deal, what happens if the outcome doesn't go through, what are the parameters for success, and how will they be monitored, and how does the project fulfil strategy. I think the RAA is similar in some ways to Rotary in that looking up your purpose, it's obviously to bring professional leaders together and provide humanitarian services and encouraging high ethical standards in your vocations and advancing goodwill and peace around the world. We're probably not quite at that level, but we certainly see everything through the prism of, is this good for our members? So when we're sitting around the board table, that's the view that we take of things. Will this be good for our members? Will it offer them value? Is this what they expect us to do with their membership? It's a great responsibility and a great privilege. So in summary, I believe that we are shifting certainly in the law as I'm working and in our board work towards a different way of working, and we have to still be very true to our core values, and it's not so different from when I started work in terms of respect, enthusiasm, working hard, having belief in yourself. And if these things are complied with, then I believe that you can be successful in corporate life and small business. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Liz. I'm really interested in knowing what your biggest challenge has been as a woman on the boards that you've been part of.
Sadly, for the question, I haven't had any challenges as a woman. I seriously haven't. I've been accepted in the places where I've been for the contribution that I've made, and I've had no issue as a woman. Yes, no, it is, and you know, I don't undervalue or discredit people who've had difficulties, but I've not. I've had a very good run and enjoyed the time and been able to contribute at the level I've wished to. Mm.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. When you went out with the RAA fans, what did you learn and how did you use that knowledge?
Interesting question, thank you. So there were a couple of things I was particularly looking for. One was we've just introduced a new tablet system into the vans, which was a significant investment in technology, so that instead of ringing through jobs or putting them through on the phone, there's a tablet displayed in the van that sends jobs through automatically, and the computer system now generates the jobs to the drivers in the particular areas. The Google Maps were not quite working as well as we might have hoped. So I was very interested to see how the people were coping with the new technology. So that was one thing I was looking at, and I was able to report that back to the board. The second thing I was looking at was just how stressful is it actually going out on the road, seeing lots of different people and having lots of different challenges and never knowing if somebody's actually going to be polite to you or rude to you. I mean, I think that would probably be quite stressful. In the times that I've been on the road, the people have generally been polite. And on one occasion, of course, we had the car that wouldn't start, and when the RAA patrol person got into the car, he turned it on. Turns out the man who didn't normally drive the car hadn't depressed the brake before starting it. Very embarrassed for him.
Thank you for those insights. As I see board's agenda these days, it's of course culture, and you've addressed that very well. Diversity, though we see some setbacks on the AMP case, and of course cybersecurity is a major issue for all directors, all boards. You have
720,000 members, yes.
And you have the personal data. What is your board doing about actually making sure that's secure?
Yes, good question. We have a team of IT specialists, and we've just engaged in the last 6 or 8 months more capability in that area, and we're also in the next budget allowing for greater capability in that area. We have presentations to the board on a regular basis of what they're doing to protect our data. We have internal audit, which is actually outsourced to one of the large accounting firms, review our security systems for management of data and provide us with their recommendations, which we've implemented. And we've also just recently updated our cybersecurity policies, as well as taking out insurance, of course. So we're very aware of it, and I think it is one of your great concerns as a director that is addressed capably, and we are so mindful of the trust that people have in us that it's an area of critical concern.
Thanks, Liz. I'm very interested in your people and culture interest, particularly as it relates to organisations that they're changing. How do you go about, what's your views, perhaps, where an organisation has to go to the future and handicapping young people's views as against status quo, in words of advice, from the government's point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. We have an innovation program going on at the RAA, which addresses not only where autonomous vehicles and other things might be going, electric vehicles, but also the future of work. It has an aspect that's the future of work. So one program we have is where we call for volunteers amongst our younger staff to work on a particular project, and then they get together over a course of 6 months usually and bring their views together and then do a presentation to the board about their views on topics, and they might go out into the street and interview, they're young people, but they interview young people, and then they each do a small segment of that presentation and present it to us. We're mindful that the space we work in is a bit old-fashioned for young people, and that young people are looking for particular ways of working. As I said, they're looking for flexibility. Workstations are changing. The way people do work is changing. We're very mindful of that. We're looking at that. We're trying to make sure that we're well positioned for the future. So there's a lot of work going into that, as well as trying to keep engaging with young, bright people. We actually have one fellow recruited from Flinders University, a fellow called Ben Fink, who is in charge of innovation, and he taps into entrepreneurs and their networks, and so we do presentations with them to make sure we know what's going on in that space. We're also a founding member of InsurTech, which is a startup insurance, different way of doing insurance. As you probably know, insurance is being done in all sorts of ways now, and that's a competitive threat to our business. Things like crowdfunding, so people will all get together. These people on this table, for example, might get together and insure somebody's mobile phone. Young people get together and insure things. There's all sorts of different ways of doing things, so we're monitoring that and making sure that we stay relevant and aware of all those new trends.
We have time for one more. Speaking of young and intelligent people, I believe you have a question.
That's all right. You've basically already answered my question.
Like I said, speaking of young and intelligent people, we have one more question.
Ma'am, I've enjoyed the talk very, very much.
Thank you.
And I noted that you mentioned you talked to some of the interstate
Yes.
Now, a lot of my colleagues tell me that they have arrangements with their automobile associations where they can travel and have accommodation overseas and things like that. We don't seem to have that here.
No, that's true. Each automobile club does things in different ways. So, for example, in New South Wales and Victoria, New South Wales has a lot of park clubs, and in Victoria they have a large club situation. The reason for that, actually, the Victorian club sold their interest in their insurance company and got a large sum of money back, so they were able to invest that into a club situation. So they're able to develop those reciprocal rights because of the way they do their business. Same with the motorhomes and park homes and those sorts of things that the NRMA operate. So it's because of the way they do their business. Having said that, we've also had a lot of discussions with overseas counterparts. I was having some discussions with UK motorhomes people last year about whether we could engage with them because of our interest in mobility and our interest in travel to get some connection and some partnership and collaboration going with them that would provide a benefit to our members. So we're always looking for those sorts of opportunities, but the reason we don't have the same reciprocal rights at the moment is just because of the different way that we run our business, and we don't have the capital to do what some of the other clubs have done.
Liz, don't run away. Thank you very much. That was a really engaging presentation that just ticked off on so many boxes. Thank you for the questions and the great responses. I'd just like to, out of tradition, present you with this memento of your presentation today. Thank you. And if we could please, in Rotary tradition, please give her a standing ovation. Thank you. And I would now like to hand back to President Rob Thomas to close the meeting. Thank you.